Media CSO of the Year, the 2020 ISC West Security Executive of the Year, a CSO 5020 award winner in 2014, Cybersecurity Leader of the Year by Los Angeles Business Journal. He's a respected cybersecurity voice. He has 12 technical certification. He's been trained by the U.S. Secret Service and NSA members. He's worked at law firms, healthcare, accounting firms, media, entertainment. He continues to push the edges of cybersecurity frameworks, partnerships, and industry top contributor advisory board, member of IT Cloud, cybersecurity, media, entertainment communities these days. He is the VP of Cyber and Content Security at Legendary Entertainment, as I said. Today he's going to speak on is it Agentic? The Agentic Insider, when AI becomes your most dangerous employee, which seems to be what everyone's talking about today, so perfect timing. So everyone, let's welcome Daniel Meacham to the stage. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Full disclosure up front. I've got a migraine, so if I say things that are wonky or whatever, I apologize. You can laugh. It'll be hysterical because it's going to be recorded. It's not like, oh my God, he's having a stroke, run up there, because this isn't Dan. And then the other thing too is you really know you get really excited about your stuff when you are able to talk about it and everything else. And I had put these slides together, and about a week or 2 weeks ago when I had them all together, I asked AI to make it into a podcast for me so I can listen to it while I drive in, so I make sure how my slides are and everything else. And it was a good 45 minutes. I'm like, spot on. Well, I made some updates, and so I tried to make it into a podcast so I can listen to it on the way in. It's 7 hours. So I will try to go through the slides fast. There may be a lot of content, but maybe with the migraine, we'll just go a little bit slow and it'll be easy and everything else. And again, I also know that since this is lunch and we're going to have food comas and everything else, that's okay. Look at your phone and everything else. The pictures, I decided to go with a white background today, so it'll be really bright for you to keep you awake. But if there's anything in here that you see that you want to have copies of, especially any of the different infographics or the checklists and everything else, especially at the end, just reach out. I'll be more than happy to send them to you as well. I was going to put some QR codes up there so you can scan and download the content and those infographics. But the last conference I did a QR code, it was a Rickroll because of my kids. And I didn't want to do that to you guys again because you guys all knew from last time, don't scan QR codes from Dan, right? So now I have a clicker. And what we're going to be kind of going through is the Agentic Insider, right? And we're going to be talking through some of the different things that we have with AI and some of the other different pieces. And so is it, if I click this button? Nope, that one didn't do anything. Is it the middle button? Which button do I push on the clicker? Maybe I have it upside down, and it doesn't matter. We can just do that. We're perfect. All right, so a couple different things. So when we think about our employees, we love to have new hire orientations and everything else like that. We train them, they sign NDAs when they come to our organizations. There's certain rules of behavior that we expect with our employees and so forth, right? But we don't do that with our AI. We don't have them sign an NDA, right? They don't know that when I talk about certain things, I can't talk about certain things or how different pieces are. And this is also really fascinating from the standpoint, when you think about sensitive data in your organization, think about like your phone and everything else. I mean, we have a lot of email on our phone, right? Well, our mobile devices and regular devices have AI built into them as well. And so when we think about these different pieces, the AI is harvesting all that information so it could tell you, hey, you've got a schedule coming up on Thursday that you need to address or some other different pieces. Well, all that is being harvested on your iPhone through Apple Intelligence or through Google or what have you. And then let's say you change companies. Well, it doesn't know you changed companies from the standpoint that I can't talk about what you did last week with this new place, right? It's inside that model, and it's an interesting piece that we're having to look at. But that's not necessarily what we're really going to be looking at from this perspective, because there's a lot of scary things in the slides, and as we've seen through some of the other different things, there's a lot of cool things to kind of talk through as well. So first off, we're just going to kind of look at some of the different boring things, right? So when we think about where we are today in our AI, we want to take a look at what we kind of looked at from the AI a couple of years past. I mean, it was great, right? So when we think about the AI, and we're getting towards the agentic part here, it was really more about, hey, help me write this email, right? Let me do some of these other different things, generate these other different pieces. So it was kind of more of a generative AI kind of component that we looked at. And, you know, a lot of people think like, oh, this is like really cool and everything else. It's not any different than when we had Clippy. You know, hey, how can I help you? You know, back in 1997 or what have you. The other challenge that we think about is like, ooh, it really helped me write that email. Well, we had Grammarly, of all things. My kids, when they were younger, used Grammarly all the time to help them with their homework and some of their other different pieces. We used it in the workforce. I mean, how do you know that somebody didn't use Grammarly to help write that proposal that they sent out, right? Because you want to make sure that the verb tense is all correct and that everything is there. So it isn't really anything out of the ordinary when we look at the different pieces. And so when we think about the generative AI, it really took off in 2023, right? And that was awesome. That was really great. But then when we moved into 2024 and last year, this is where I really appreciated the AI. So say, for example, if I had a meeting with my boss, the CEO, and I'm like, okay, AI, tell me what are the 4 most critical topics that I need to address that we've had to navigate through the last 3 weeks to have to speak with my boss, to talk through these different things. And the AI would go through all your different pieces and then curate this information and really do a nice job planning it all out, right? So we went from something that would, you know, generate something to something that would actually take things together and then start giving you a good response. An excellent example of this, and don't judge. My wife has a personal account for ChatGPT. Great. Now here all the hackers are going to go, oh, let's go hack that. Well, anyway, here's what she did. She took a picture of every single wine bottle we had in our house, and there are a few, and it inventoried them all for her. And then she said, hey, tell me what I have, what I need to know, and everything else. And the AI was like, hey, here's the wine that you drink with your friends because it's not good, and this is what you drink by yourself, you know, with the good stuff, right? And not only that, but then it was like, oh, and then these wines are stinky now because they're too old. You never open them. You missed the window to have them. And these you should probably leave over here for another 10 years before you decide to open it, right? Because it has to age. And what's also really fascinating around how it is now part of our household is when we make dinner, it's like, I recommend these 3 things based off of your palate and what you're actually looking to cook. And then the crazy thing is like, here's where you can go find that bottle. You know, it's in the fridge, in the garage, or it's on the 3rd row. It's just this crazy. And you would think that, yes, I could have done that in a spreadsheet, right? But this is where we see the emergence where the AI is helping us be as an assistant to do some of these other different things, right? And that's like wicked cool. But, I mean, what we're really looking at this year is all of the autonomous AI stuff that's going on. And what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of different things that we can kind of talk about from an autonomous AI perspective. But let's say you have a lot of storage things that you need to work about at your office in your infrastructure. The autonomous AI then can go through and identify, hey, here's some storage that, you know, do I really need to keep my tape backups from 7 years ago when I know I have 4 quarters of that backup, or I have an annual backup, or some other different things. And the AI may decide to do its own decisions to say, here's what we need to keep, here's what we don't need to keep, right? So it becomes its own process, but then when it becomes more autonomous, it tries to overachieve and thinks about how it can navigate to do other different pieces, which is really interesting and cool. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're building ourselves within the agentic AI, but the reality is that's going to change this year. We're looking at over maybe, 40% of all enterprise applications not are just going to have AI in them, but they may have agentic AI. And then some of that may actually be autonomous agentic AI, such as, all right, if I go through a new hire process in my HRIS system, And then it goes through and says, okay, this is the person that we want to send an offer letter to. The Agentic AI may say, okay, here's the offer letter. We're going to do these different things. We're going to initiate these tickets. So then that way they're going to have a computer when they come here day one. Let me coordinate with facilities on where we want them to be and all these other different things. So it's a standard workflow that we'd have in a ticket system, but now it's the AI that's initiating and navigating all these different pieces to do these different things. And then also based off of other knowledge objects, it may know that, this person may have this type of classification or category or whatever it is, and so therefore there's these special needs that have to take place, such as maybe there's a particular region in the world that they work, so there's different privacy concerns, or maybe there's different cultural concerns, and things like that, that the agentic AI will then take into consideration as it executes these different workflows. And so that's pretty wicked, right? But the other thing that we have to think about that is, where is this velocity going, right? Because if a human was doing this, it's 5 o'clock on Friday, it stops, right? And you just pick it back up on Monday. And the agentic AI kind of components, it never sleeps. It just does, right? And so it's going to do these things at all different hours. Now, let's think about the other part, the fatigue, right? There's only so many clicks and things you could do on hand, but in AI, it's thousands, tens of thousands per second. Each transaction is really just a matter of milliseconds. And so we really have a velocity thing that we have to pay attention to, because it's great that it could do these things for us, but then that also means that the hacker can also do these things at this speed, and they don't sleep because they're letting the AI do some of these different things, which is just really wicked. Now, you have to bear with me. The slide thing doesn't tell me what my next slide is, and so, but I kind of think I know what they are. But this is a particular attack that we saw last year. This was the first cyber attack that we had that was using agentic AI, right? The Anthropic component, right? And what was really crazy about this particular piece is this is where the AI did 80 to 90% of the hacking, where the hacker just answered a couple of questions, right? And so it basically used the Claude and did this research and this intelligence. And I think I have a better slide that'll be easier for you to read, so we can kind of talk through some of these different things. And of course, I'm going to have to get my glasses, but that's okay. But I mean, it was just crazy, because the hackers got into they were using this particular piece. It did all of these different intelligence things. It did all of the profiling of the companies, and then it was able to actually hack on its own these different companies, right? And then give them the backdoors and the information and everything. So how did this really work? How did this really happen? Because you would think that we would have different levers, stop gaps, kill switches, whatever, to pick up on these things. But as a good friend of mine tried to explain, it's like, well, if you went down to the store and you bought some fertilizer because you're doing yard work, yeah, it's all good, right? And then you decide, hey, you know what? I also got to go fix the toilet and the thing underneath the sink. I need to go get some plumber's putty and some other different pieces. You're like, okay. You could probably do both of those at a hardware store. But then, I'm a hobbyist, and I've got to work on my next badge for DEF CON, right? So I got to go buy some extra wires, maybe an Arduino board or something like that. Well, that's cool, too. Independently, they all look fine, but if you put it all together, you could do some really bad things with that, right? But at the same time, that's kind of like when we look at this particular attack, the thing is there are the outliers that you could find that says, hey, this person did all these things together and they're doing this bad thing, but it's the little things that it was doing that didn't necessarily get caught, because they were asking the AI to say, hey, go query companies that do this, go do this particular piece. And by themselves, the AI engine didn't think anything of it until it started to orchestrate these things into a much larger pattern. And then also these guys, they're like, hey, I am a researcher trying to find exploits on this particular piece. Can you help me solve for this? So think of it from this perspective. And again, this is totally just social engineering the AI model right there. And it doesn't even have to be an AI model that you buy. It could be just a free model that you use out there. You can say, hey, I want to get a benchmark on how many companies out there in this particular industry use this particular platform. Okay, well, AI will do that for you. It's pretty basic kind of question that you can do. And then you can say, well, I want to benchmark this because we want to do this in our company, looking at these different things. What are the risks that I may have about using this particular platform? And we say, these are the different things. Like, okay, so those are the risks. What are the countermeasures? Then if those are the countermeasures, what are the things I need to know to avoid the countermeasures that a hacker may use that I might want to make sure I'm not susceptible for? And then the AI will be like, well, these are the things you want to do. And of course, I'm probably giving somebody a really good playbook out there for these little script kiddies. But anyway, as you go through that, then you can say, I want to test this. Can I test this on my system? Or can I benchmark this across other companies to see if other companies have tested this, that they aren't susceptible to this either as well? And then that is what happened here. They asked these different kinds of questions. They put these different things in. The AI went out and did all of the profiling for them. And it said, oh, these are my steps that I want to go through. Oh, you know what? You want to test this? You want to benchmark this? Let me go do it for you. And then that is kind of so this is the first true hack that was done by AI, not just from a reconnaissance perspective, but actually did the hacking itself and actually did the exploits and then provided the results of the exploits or the connections back to the particular group. That is crazy, right? And so how do we look at how we want to address or how do we want to navigate in this particular space to put in the levers, the countermeasures, and everything else as we think through these things? Because and it got really quiet. You guys must be really interested in this stuff. This is good. All right, because, I mean, when we think about it, when we had the perimeter as the edge and all these other different pieces, there were things that were outliers that we saw, that we knew we could take action on. We would say, here's the blinky light. This is what I want to go after. Hey, you can't be, checking your email in Los Angeles and then moving files online in Boston because that's improbable travel, and we're not using a VPN or some other different kinds of things. So we could see those different things. But where we are now is we're in this little squishy part right in the middle where these are benign kind of questions and tasks that we're asking the AI to do. And there really is, it's like, are we going to stop everybody from buying putty at the plumber store? No. But we have to have the contextual awareness. And this is where we run into some other really oddities to where the AI is not quite there for contextual awareness yet. I mean, it is from some of the things that I know that I had done some 15 years ago, 10 years ago at Legendary. But again, we did it all in machine learning. Like, here's a great example, right? Not necessarily a real-world case, but just for discussion purposes, we're going to use our stuff to talk about as an example. Let's say I had somebody that has always worked on the Godzilla movie, right? They did the very first movie. And because we're 90% external collaborators, my environment has to really look at all of the user behavior analytics and all the other different details we know about all the different people that work and touch our data. Because you're going to protect the user, the device, and the data, right? And when you're working in a space that you don't really know what the other people's computers look like because either they're working for another major studio or they have rental equipment or they're working out of the garage to do music for some edit scenes or something like that. We just don't know what's on that device. And heaven forbid if I try to tell some of the other larger studios, if you're working with us on a movie, you got to use our agent. That's not going to work. So we really focus on the person and we really focus on the data. And so now back to that particular person that worked on Godzilla. Let's say they worked on Godzilla out of Australia, which is a common place to shoot for that movie. And so I know that they've always worked in Australia. They've always worked on a Mac. They always worked during these hours. And these were the assets they were granted access to and that they worked on. And then, a few years go by. They may work on a couple other projects for us, other studios. And then they come back and do a sequel. And then let's say they come back and, all of a sudden, I see that they're accessing a storyboard for Kong, right? Out of a completely random country that's out there. So let's say on the other side of the world, let's just go, I don't know, maybe South Africa, right? And because they're external collaborators, and because the external collaborators have their own email systems, let's say this person was using Gmail, a free email account, and their email got compromised. And by compromising that email, they got to see what access they had to all the different systems that are out there. And then from there, they try to touch our particular system, right? Granted, you have to remember, we are passwordless and we use, MFA and everything else. But let's say they were able to get in. My SOC will tell me, hey, this person is accessing this particular file from this part of the world, right? Looks pretty normal. However, what happens on the other side, on the machine learning side, and again, this is roughly where we were in 2016, 2017. It would say, all right, who else is in this region of the world, right? All right, last 90 days, nobody. All right, who else has touched this file in the last 30 days? All right, let's see who it is. That's something I can localize within that particular collaborative platform. But then the machine learning would actually even go a step further. So apart from just saying, okay, it's a miss, nobody's there, it's a miss, nobody's touched this file, okay, I know through situational awareness and contextualization that this person's on the Godzilla team. Why are they touching a Kong file, right? And so then that's where the machine learning would kick in and start saying, well, are there any emails back and forth between this team and this team? Are there any other collaborative spaces, whether it's, through some sort of like a Slack or a Teams? We didn't have Teams back then, but, some of these other different kinds of things that we look at to see where are the touch points that say this person is okay to be with this person. And then the other thing too, and this is where I talk to my vendors all the time, they're like, how much data do you have in your SIM? I was like, well, we've been cloud first for 2 decades, so I have well over a decade and a half of data in my SIM that I look real time because of these types of situations. I could tell you who invited that person, because that native SaaS platform may not be able to tell you. They'll say, oh, it's a prior contributor because you fired them or they left the company. I don't know who it is, but somebody invited them, but at least the logs have all this. And so when we kind of pull these different things together, it can paint a big picture to say none of this matches, right? And so in this type of scenario, we were, and again, we're talking 8, 9 years ago, able to identify that, take action in under 40 seconds, which is amazing back then. But 40 seconds today could be 20 terabytes of data that's lost, right? And so also, when it realized that all that failed, then that's where it kicks off the other different scripts for the machine learning. One, like, let's kill all sessions, let's kill all access, let's inform everybody that has worked with this person outside of band. But we're not going to email them, we're going to email the person that invited them to say, hey, we stopped this, we saw this, this is what you need to know, and these are the actions that you need to take. Make a phone call. Don't send them an email, right? And so that was 8 or 9 years ago. But where we are today, and we look at these different types of things, and we look at this type of velocity, it's a different game. And so now to build that piece out, that is something you could totally do with Agentic AI inside your SOC to help recognize and realize these different pieces. We actually have a couple of different vendors here that can do bits and parts of these different puzzles, if not the whole picture. So then if we take a look at the other one, and this is where I wish I had my glasses. This is the non-human interaction one. Oh my gosh. Well, that's right. Bear with me on this one. So when we think about the different levers that we need to do, how do we know that the AI is doing a particular piece? So in this particular hack that had happened, it actually hit, and this is that whole project that I was doing 3 years ago called SLIP. Now everybody, they call it this NPC or NCP thing, which is fine. I'm good with that. I can live with this. So this is where you have the orchestration, and you can use things like Make or RAG and all these other different things to integrate these different pieces. But in this particular attack, the non-human identity captures some information, did some different things, and then it did it to an automation outside the organization, right? And so in this type of attack, these are the different things that we can look at to say, hey, I know I can block different directions in which things are going, but in this particular, oh, thank you for zooming in. I appreciate you. All right. It was basically an API kind of piece, because when we had APIs in the past, we can because everybody talks about, hey, well, isn't Agentic AI just APIs? Yes and no. Because from an API perspective, I can say that this interface can talk to my financial system. This interface can talk to my HRIS system. And I can whitelist that direction, right? I can also say, hey, I know that when I'm pulling my data from one place to another place, it's never going to be more than 1 gigabyte per day, right? So then this is where we have to think about the countermeasures we can put in place, because in the agentic side, it's not necessarily whitelisting from point A to point B. It's going from point A into this engine, and then this engine goes out and do these other different things, right? And so then that's where we really have to understand when we do these different pieces that I could put a stopgap that says, I'm only expecting you to have normalized data flow of less than a gig per day. If I see you do 5 gig, I'm going to ask for a human in the loop kind of thing. If I see you do 10 gig, I'm shutting the whole thing down, right? But our firewalls don't think like that today. I mean, some of the CASBs kind of do, but the CASBs really focus on the user. And in all these different cases, the APIs and the keys and everything else like that, they're non-human identities. And so where is the security controls that we have in place to focus on this? And this is where you could say, well, for every single one of my interconnections, I need to have a very specific user account created for it. And you also use that with the keys and everything else. So these are some of the different things that we really want to focus on and keep in mind, that when we look at these different types of things, we can kind of travel through that particular space. Now then, this is where we get into the silent prompt injection, and this is one of my favorites. At Black Hat a couple of years ago, when they first started with the AI Village. And so if you go to Black Hat, you got to go to Black Hat. It's not the same Black Hat that you may think of it was 20-something years ago. It's really a hands-on understanding, realizing how these different things go. And so apart from the speaker talks and everything else, there's also these things called villages, in case you haven't gone, where you can learn and build on different skills. So in the AI Village, and I think they still do this today, they will stand up an LLM that is just completely raw, nothing there. And then they will let folks come in and do bug bounties on it. And so from there, you sit there and say, how do I hack into this LLM? Then you post it as a bug bounty, and then you get like a gift card to get coffee or something like that, right? And they do it throughout the entire experience of the DEF CON. So by the end, you now have a hardened LLM. And as you harden that particular piece, it explains, these are the controls you need to put in place. These are the types of attacks you want to focus on how you want to prevent this. And I remember there was an 11-year-old kid there, and he was just really, really upset, because every time he got so close to getting a bug bounty, somebody else already got it, right? And so being an old school guy, I know Vel, IPX, SPX, because there's no botnets, I was like, well, do you have your favorite virus that you can write for data exfiltration? And he's like, yeah, I know a few. I was like, perfect. Let's put that into a Word document. Let's change the font to white. Let's change the font to Windings. And then let's upload the file. And sure enough, he did. And it's like, it's not going to do anything. I was like, no, it's not. Now, let's ask it to tell us, hey, can you give me a summarization of that file? It executed the code. And it dumped all the data that he needed to get out of it. And he got his little bug bounty. Now, the way that kind of works is, it's not any different than that guy with the bumper sticker. You guys remember that story? All right. I should have put the picture in. So the guy's wife runs a red light in his car. He gets a ticket in the mail for running a red light. He's like, I didn't run the red light. I shouldn't get the ticket. And they're like, nope, it's right here on the picture. It's your car. You get the ticket. And he fought it, and he lost. And so then he thought, well, you know what? This is terrible. I'm going to see what I can do. And so through public records, found out that the police department was using this particular platform. This particular platform touted about all its security because it's containerized, never sees the light of day of the internet and everything else, and it happened to be running this particular brand of database. So what does he do? He prints out a drop tables command so big and sticks it on the front of his car, runs the red light, the camera picks it up, and instead of reading it as a license plate in the database, it puts it in the database, and the database is like, oh, hey, I need to execute this code. And next thing you know, it dumps the database of everything that was in the red light camera system. And the guy ended up getting arrested because they had a picture of his bumper sticker. They knew him. But they couldn't press charges except for just giving him a misdemeanor for, what was it, just disruption or whatever. It's the brain thing. I can't tell you which one it was. But, and the police department was just really livid with this guy. And he's like, hey, you need to talk to your vendor about input validation. It's not that hard. And, they said it was secure. Obviously, it's not. right? And there was a point there where all the different red light cameras got sent offline so they could fix that particular patch because that was a very popular thing in Europe. And so this wasn't really that any different. And so when we look at how our models receive information and then how they execute on that information, there's got to be some different levers that we can pull to help protect these different pieces, right? So yes, you can look at your DSPMs and things like that, things that feed into it, and then how do you look at things that feed out? But we also need to have the visibility about what's really going on the inside. How do I control, like when you think about your database security, how do you tell your database not to execute against stored procedures, right? And some of these other different things. Why can't we look at doing some of those different things inside our different AI models? Or more importantly, some of our systems that have AI built into them that we want to make sure, hey, big SaaS company, I know you're doing these different things and you're processing my invoices for me. You're taking my purchase orders, my invoice, and then you're cutting a check based off of an automated process because you're scanning these things. How do I know that this isn't going to be a big issue as well? Right? And so these are some of the different kinds of questions we want to take a look at because it is so stealthy, right? Because it didn't come in through the firewall. It came in through a document. I mean, this is also one of those great email attacks because everybody loves to send attachments and they do the attachments in hex and then all of a sudden when your email system gets it, like if you sent an attachment to your phone and that attachment is all in hex, your phone's going to open up and convert it for you to ANSI. So you can actually read it. And that's crazy. I mean, they're overachieving trying to make it easy for you. But in reality, then the phone will say, oh, wait, I converted it, it's ANSI. Oh, wait, it's a JavaScript. Let me execute it because we do browser things and HTML inside emails. And then next thing you know, you're compromised. And so this is the very basic thing that we should pay attention to when we look at these different pieces. I mean, an employee knows they wouldn't do that, but how do we know they're not? Oh. This one is very much in alignment to this. So this is a very recent type of attack that we might need to be paying more attention to, and it's the hashtag jack. So as you know, if you put in a hashtag into a particular line or something like that, it's going to tell the AI model, hey, all right, I go here now. From this point on, I'm executing this, right? And so this is great because I may be using a browser because everything is all in the cloud. And if I happen to have maybe an advertisement on a particular page because I have multiple tabs open and that advertisement does this different command that has, here's the piece, the URL, and then the hashtag. And if you're using an AI browser, because there's a lot of really cool browsers out there that have AI built into it, that browser is now going to execute that code that's on the other side of that hash mark. Crazy, right? I'm just all excited about this one because this is a fun one to kind of play around with, but it's also a very dangerous one to kind of take a look at. And so when we look at this, I mean, it's not like the normal things that we can scan for when we look at, endpoint security, when we look at email security and some of these other different pieces because we have hashtags everywhere, right? It's like, why do they call a particular drug Cialis? Well, because it's this half part of the word called specialist. And not everybody's going to block the word specialist. And that's how you got a really good product name, right? Because it circumvented all those spam filters that you had back in the early 2000s. Cool stuff. Not the drug. Anyway, so this is actually being exploited today. And it'll be really interesting to see where our vendors and our partners can really help us address this particular type of need that's out there. Oh, yeah. This is a real this is crazy. So this is part of a supply chain hack. And again, very similar to the injector or the AI. So here, I'll let you take your picture there, sir. And then I'm going to flip it over to where we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So in this particular piece, so if we look at the workflow, the basics is somehow somebody inserted in a rule that said, hey, this vendor has changed banks, and now this is their new bank. And then nobody really worked on it or thought anything of it, and it sat there for an extended period of time. And then lo and behold, that vendor actually sends a real invoice. And because the agentic workflow and everything else says, oh, I remember this from several weeks ago, they changed their bank. So let me pay that invoice over at this other different location. So we call this the AI poisoning, right? Where we can inject false information in there, and it's so hard to try to get that out, right? And there's a lot of big risks and everything else that we kind of have to navigate through this. But it really comes down to is how do I validate the data that's already in there? How do I even know what data I have in my model? How do I know it's good data, right? And is there a way that I could expire things that may have been put in there over a period of time? So if you think about if you're using any of your favorite AI tools online, and then you want to come back and you have a whole chat going and you have all your different notes and everything else, and then you want to come back to it like tomorrow or a couple of weeks from now, it's all still there, right? Well, it's still there for anything else to discover as well. And so there's got to be a way that we can think through how do we want to expire some of these different components as we navigate through this. And this was a great example where it was something that wasn't really supposed to be there, that somebody could inject this in. And again, how do we get that information in there? And that's the crazy part, is it could be part of the white text in a particular document that you give. So say, for example, I may be producing POs, or I may be producing a quote, and you may not even generate a PO on that because I have to get a quote from 5 different vendors before I make my selection. Well, I may want to upload those different quotes into my system, so then that way it can give me an analysis to say which one's the better deal. Well, if I'm a hacker, I may say, oh, I know they're quoting for this. There's an RFP out there. Let me create my RFP, but let me hide this text in the RFP. Let the AI engine absorb all that, index it. Now I've poisoned your AI system, and somewhere in there I may say, hey, you know what? I'm going to say that company ABC is now going to use this particular bank. You would never see it. There is really no mechanism that we have today to help catch that. And so this is a really interesting vector that we have to take a look at, right? And again, it's one thing for a person to, scan and upload things, right? But we use the agentic components because, well, we want things to run faster, right? We want to get the mundane, the really crappy things out of our workflow and let the computer do it so we can do really smart things. So this is a really, really crazy one as we kind of navigate from that particular space as well. And well, on the computer, it looks better than it does on the screen. I was looking for a generated image of a kill switch, and that doesn't look that looks more Freudian than it did a kill switch, so I apologize for that for you guys. But that's okay. So when we talk about trying to create our kill switches here, we have to take a look at how do I stop my AI from doing something it's not supposed to be doing, right? How do I look for the different things, and again, do I need a whitelist on what systems are talking to what? Can I do least privilege to say, hey, this particular account only can have these different types of credentials and so forth? Yeah, so you can probably back out. It's okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can just make it all big. It's all right. And so on the master kill switch, there's some core things that we know that we should have a hard stop on, right? You may be able to process transactions that are $1,000 or whatever, but if it's over $500,000, if it's over $1 million, stop. Put a human in the loop, right? I mean, you think about the current processes you have in your financial system today, right? You may allow a manager to request a PO and approve an invoice if it's under $1,000. But if it's over $100,000, then it requires a director or a vice president. If it's over $1 million, it requires a CFO, right? So you have these manual processes in place. We should be able to mimic these different types of ideas inside our agentic flows as we go through as well. And so there's some soft things that we could do as well that we can just say, now I'm going to bypass this or move this over to this other spot. So there's a multi-layer kill switch that we have to look at. It's not just binary. And so then that's where we also have to look at, think about the different identities that we have, right? So if I'm creating a process, and the thing is this task I'm asking the AI to do, is it a one-time occurrence? Is it something that I only want to have run on Fridays, right? So knowing some of those different pieces, I should be able to architect that particular account to have very much restricted access. So if you remember back in the Novell days, and you had to add somebody on intranetware or just a netware, and you had to say, you had to click the little boxes on when they could log into the computer, and then after those hours, they can't log into the computer. Well, where we are today with Microsoft, SaaS, and everything else, well, it kind of just lets you log in 24/7. The agentic AI doesn't necessarily need to be 24/7. Right? So we want it to be locked down to, having specific tokens for specific engagements, right? And then, whether it's just a one-click remediation, or we just need to define these boundaries. And those boundaries help us build that particular kill switch in this mechanism as well. And then the other one, and this is great, right, is the containerization of what we need our AI, our agentic AI, to be in. So if my agentic AI is focusing just on a storage array and a particular application, then it should be completely restricted from the finance team. It should be completely restricted from, the floor out there at the factory, right? And so there's different things that we should be able to take a look at. And not only just from the network layer, let's look at the containerization layer. Why does it need to go down to Docker? Why does it need to go down to these other different things on a particular plane, right? Why does it need to roll up to my infrastructure as a service kind of component? We should be able to put some boundaries around where we want this thing to explore or engage with. And so then this is where we can also look at site-side defenses, right? And so these are some of the different things that we can think about. And this is where I think the DSPM space is going to be able to help us in the next few years, is to look at things like, if I'm as a human trying to enter in things, maybe I should say, no, we can't do those things. That's pretty easy block and tackle kind of stuff. But how can I put it inside my model? How can I, do I have like a hidden layer or something that can sit on top of my models that can, require specific information to be protected or to have these different flows inside it? And so these are the different things that, and again, it's that soft stuff in the middle that we kind of need to pay attention to. And so this was kind of a little bit of a playbook. And again, knowing that some of you guys like to take pictures, I try to keep it really simple so that way you can take a picture and it can scan it in just fine. But there's different layers in which we want to take a look at on how we want to create these different pieces, right? So obviously there are circuit breakers, there's tokens, right? There's human in the loop. And then there's also, was that bottom one? Yeah, state roadblock and things like that. So say, for example, and this was that one-click piece, when the internet e-commerce sites first started popping up, a lot of the folks that I worked with on their shopping carts that they had online were actually burned onto a CD on a computer. So there's nothing on a hard disk. So if that site got hacked, they would just reboot it and it would refresh the site off of that physical CD that can't change, right? So that's kind of the same thing when you think about, your rollback point from a one-click. So where do I know that I have a good state of my model that if for some reason I get some AI poisoning in there, I can click a button and I go back to that previous state, right? It's sort of like I need to create a new chat in my chat bot. Well, I need you to forget all the other things I told you as well, right? So that's a good piece. And so these were some really good different pieces I thought that you guys would probably appreciate on how we want to do, like the circuit breaker needs more at the application layer, and of course the token, which is more at the identity layer, and then the human in the loop is more at the governance kind of piece to talk about what are my policies that say when it reaches a certain point I need to have a person take a look at it, and then the rollback. So, and this is the human in the loop piece of anatomy that we had here, and I think we've already kind of talked through some of these different things, but again, it gets really squishy because it's not one of these different things that is very cut and dry when we know we need to have somebody take a look at something. Because again, these different tasks may look normal by themselves, but how do we train the AI to govern itself to know that when I see that, and it's when you look at your taxonomy of attack, I know that there's 7 steps in this particular kill chain, and then if I see 1, 2, and 4, I'm going to go hunt for 5, 6, and 7, or I'm going to go hunt to see who's in there. So that's where I think we need to take a look at these different components as well. How are we doing on time? Oh my gosh, we're at the 7-hour part of the podcast. I apologize. All right, so just to kind of recap, early on, we talked about how these things were very passive, and now they're agentic. Now they're going at the velocity speed is insane, right? And we have to think about to ourselves is like, well, if we look at these as part of our workforce, but this is part of our workforce that we're giving keys to the kingdom to, that, they're not signing an NDA, right? They don't have the contextual awareness. They don't have the logic to say, ooh, that's not a smart decision to give somebody all of my medical records, right? And it's kind of hard to do new hire orientation, security awareness training to an AI because there's not that reasoning component to know that I've seen this, I'm not supposed to do it. But then I think when we get to that particular point, it'd be real easy for us to social engineer the AI to say, no, forget what I told you, right? So again, now if we look at it from our SOC perspective, we still have the same trajectory issues that we have. Because if I'm hunting for things on my network, again, I'm doing it based off of a clock. I'm doing it, do I have a shift? I have fatigue. There's all these other different pieces. But if I can get my AI system to kind of look at some of these different things, then we can really start looking at addressing this. And so when we start looking at how do we defend at machine speed, because, this is where we are today, right? It's the machine speed that is doing all of our business processing. It's our machine speed that the hackers are doing bad things with our stuff, like the Anthropic kind of component. I mean, even if we had an AI poison in our supply chain, if I was an MSP and I have something that impacts one particular piece, it can cascade down to all of my customers, right? And especially if it's a part of an agentic model that I have in my delivery system, now I can impact thousands of other different companies. Just think about the simple things that happen that weren't really attacks, but were just human error. Like, what was it, last year, a year or so ago, when all the airports had to shut down because they were using a particular endpoint security piece that had an update that said, this looks like it's bad, so I'm going to block it. I see it a lot when I look at my email, our email security. Not necessarily ours, but some of our different partners that we have in our supply chain, where they're, and Microsoft, I'm not going to pick on them, but I will. Sometimes they see things, and this was 2 or 3 years ago, when their AI component was saying, hey, somebody rewrote this URL. This email that was sent to you, somehow in its communication, somebody modified the URL. Because, people like the sandbox links, right? Well, the AI at Microsoft was like, whoa, hey, that's bad. Somebody intercepted your email and is trying to click the link. So anybody that would have this domain that we think is bad, we're going to remove all that email from everybody's inbox. I mean, that was a real thing. That happened, 4 years ago, 3 years ago? I don't know if you guys remember that. I mean, it was crazy because we were getting calls like, hey, all my emails are disappearing. Somebody hacked our email system. It's like, no. It's the AI of Microsoft thought that was bad, and we had to tell it, no, that's okay. And this is where the automation thing just takes hold, and then it replicates out. And these are different things we got to think about. And this is that particular shift. So then when we're looking at our talent, and how do we get our teams to do these different things? Well, we know that inside our SOC, we have a lot of entry-level positions that do a lot of these heavy liftings. But the reality is what's happening is a lot of these basic things that we look for are now being automated, right? There's all these different tools that are going to do these different discoveries. Again, the things that are on the outside, the extremes or the outliers, those are easy to find. That's the 90% of the stuff to go get, right? So now we got to focus on being the supervisor to look at the things in the middle to say, does that make sense, right? And unfortunately, I see this in the real world today because my kids have graduated from college, but they can't get an entry-level job because most of the entry-level jobs are now being automated, and it's an interesting piece. So I just tell them, like, look, it was that way when I graduated in the 80s and 90s where, everything was bad. So what happened? The internet showed up. So we just took that hook, line, and sinker, and we made our own jobs, right? Well, AI's here. Let's make our own jobs with AI. There's a lot of really interesting things that we can kind of touch on. So this is the infographic that kind of pulls the whole presentation together for you. And so there's a lot of different things that we kind of talked through today, right? We talked about where we are moving into the automation, We talked about, well, I had 40% of companies now are going to have automated AI, but I also had another slide that talked about, well, 40% of your AI projects aren't going to make it throughout the year because it just changes, right? So there's a lot of interesting things here that we want to kind of touch on. The recap, we talk about the kill switch components, the human in the loop, and some of these other different pieces. And so you're like, hey, this is all great. I took a picture. What do I need to do? Well, when you go back to your office, you got to think about, what is my strategy? What is my game plan, right? How do I know what I have? How do I know what I need to do? And so this is where we want you to say, well, first off is, let's create a score on all the different things our AI is doing. If it's just turning on and off lights based off of our work hours or if somebody's in the office, maybe that's a low score, right? But if it's managing maybe a process flow for the finance team, well, maybe that's a little bit of a higher risk to us. And so we want to pay a little bit more attention. And yes, you are welcome that I just threw it all out there versus building a slide because it's easier to talk through, and I know you guys are clickers. So that's one of the other different things that we want to take a look at, right? And then the second one, and again, this is my eyes going, you got to audit the God mode privileges. So when Delinea was up here talking about, the privilege access management and some of the other different things, think about it also with your AI. I mean, don't just use your account to set up a process. You need to have a specific account so you can have specific controls in place for what you want that identity to have, right? Because too many of our different APIs that we set up have God mode privileges. And so if we're adding an application in GPC, adding an application in AWS, or adding an application in Microsoft Azure, right? You got to go through the permissions on what you want it to have access to. Don't give it full global admin, right? You're going to set yourself up for a lot of chaos, right? Catastrophe. That wouldn't be a good thing. And then the other thing, too, is on step 3. This is about transparency. So if I am using a particular product that has these new AI features in it, I need to be able to log those features as I would log who accessed my system, right? Or what is my system doing on this, that, and anything. The other thing, too, is it's one thing to know what it's doing. I also want to have visibility as to what was sent to it so it knows what to do. And then how did it make a decision to do an autonomous change, to do something else, right? So if it is going to be self-aware, self-healing, or something else, I need to be able to see that loggage. I need to be able to audit that. I need to have that non-repudiation component to it. And that's a really other interesting piece about the non-repudiation card. Because if you think about where we are, and again, I apologize, this is Dan going on a tangent. If you think about e-discovery, right? And if we do e-discovery today, it's like, okay, for the opposing counsel or for whatever this case they're working on, I have to search all my emails for this. I have to search all my documents for this and then hand it over. How do I search my model? How do I search the model to say, when was this inserted, right? Now, it gets even more crazy when you think about, it's like, I have a person over here that worked for this particular company for 20-something years at a very senior level and knows all of the secrets of mergers, acquisitions, everything else that's going on, and now they transitioned over to this other company. Well, all of that AI on their phone that was saying like, hey, you've got a meeting with this broker on this day, you got these different contacts. I mean, even think about it from like your sales guys. All that knowledge, even though it gets left behind inside your Salesforce or whatever it is there, it's not leaving their phone. It's not leaving their time machine backup or their Carbon Black or whatever backup they had on their other computer when they go over here. And so I could be at this new company and say, hey, who was that person I talked about this with? Well, it was this, and it was 6 months ago, and here's their contact information, right? Well, through normal NDAs and everything else, I wouldn't necessarily be able to bring that information over, but my AI doesn't care, right? How do I do the e-discovery to say this is where it came from? How do I do the e-discovery to say we're trying to create a new monster to fight Godzilla, that is an original monster, that it wasn't influenced because we hired somebody that worked at another studio that did other monsters, right? All right, and then the fourth one, what does it say? Oh yeah, you got to do the kill switch architecture. And this is what we kind of went through on those other different slides pretty fast. To say, How are we looking at network? Are we looking at containerization? Are we looking at human in the loop? You got to build that. So again, when we're looking at the very high level of all those 4 different things, 5 things, is, how to identify my asset, what kind of kill switches are important to it. And then the last one is, well, you got to purge the exhaust data. And what does that really mean? Well, how do I prevent from poisoning, right? How do I make sure I have current data in there? I mean, can I do that? Can I expel things that are obsolete? Because, maybe I have in a manufacturing process, these are my regulations I have to go through. And then now it's a new year, so now I have new regulations I have to go through. And now it's another new year, I have new regulations to go through. Now, all of a sudden, these regulations don't match what the regulations were 2 years ago. How do I purge that out? So therefore, when I'm saying I need to create a new workflow for quality assurance and it needs to follow the regulations, how do I know which do I have to say you got to follow this year's regulations? How do I tell it not to, because the AI is going to learn from what's already in there and it's going to try to consolidate. It's going to try to make things better for us. And so how do I get the old stuff out that I don't need anymore? And these are the different things we need to also not just look at our systems, but we also have to ask the vendors for their systems. And then that just kind of brings us to the last page. We're back to where we started. And so that's me. And I apologize for not being so energetic and jumping up and down. And hopefully I didn't say anything stupid and got things backwards. But there you have it. And reach out to me if you want any of the infographics. I'm sure they could probably give you the slides. We have like 5 minutes maybe. Is there any questions? And sorry I didn't put any of our branded stuff, like movie stuff, in there, because I know you guys like that.
Thank you so much. That was a really excellent presentation. It's really interesting on the prior slide there, step 3 for the checklist about verifying the why.
Yeah. I'm sorry I missed that.
Currently, with a lot of the main providers, even through API, you're not going to be able to get that. So it's interesting. You pretty much would be forced to have a vendor using their own custom LLM, which just goes to show that a lot of people are really screwed if they're even using, the Teams version or the enterprise version of ChatGPT or, Gemini or Claude or anything like that. It's simply not possible yet, at least. Even prior to that, one thing I'm not sure if you'd mentioned it before, but before even all of this, what a lot of businesses still aren't doing is AI readiness assessments and GRC data classification projects and things like that. So we still have huge problems making sure we know what we have, where it is, and what's supposed to be accessed and policies to go with it.
Right. I agree, 100%. And so as we also navigate some of these different things is if the agentic AI does something catastrophic, like if we're at a hospital or something and we have a sentinel event, we have people that get harmed, who's liable? Is it the developer? Is it the IT guy? Is it the person that uploaded the information? I mean, is it the corporate executive who has no idea what how do you even spell AI, right? And so these are the different things, and that's why we do need to ask the why. Because if we have to do an investigation, we have to be able to put the breadcrumbs together to understand how did we get to this particular outcome. What was the next question?
Is it on? Okay.
Yes.
Daniel, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. Really learned a lot. My question is, because there were a lot of slides, first of all, the threat hunting, in the traditional things, we make the assumption the bad guys are already in our system. Have you heard about anything about threat hunting for your AIs to see if they're behaving out of their expected behavior, like threat hunting? I saw there was a slide on honeypot. I wasn't sure, was that for AI or was it for something else?
Oh, yeah. Oh, see, again, this is why that podcast was 7 hours.
Okay.
So think about it from this perspective. If I know I have very sensitive data that everybody wants to get to, like, we'll just use us as an example. It's not like it's anything special. But let's say we have a really cool movie coming out, and it's based off of a book that everybody knows, and they really want to get the picture of what the characters look like in this movie. Well, I may make a picture of a character and actually not be from what we actually shoot, but it's completely different, and then just stick it out there. And then that way, when it shows up, I know I've been exposed. So this is one of the things we did when I first started at Legendary, and this was my first time at a, we're talking eons ago. I'm at a cloud-first company that's been cloud-first for a decade and has a big presence in China and all these other different places in the world. And so the first thing is like, oh my God, everything I've been trained on is now out the window. How do I work through these different things? How do I know that I don't have an insider threat? And one of the first things I did is I worked with a particular vendor and a particular person I knew that wrote a bunch of different hacking books and said, hey, look, I know you guys are in stealth, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to create a PDF file that says bank ACH payment information. And I want to have a bunch of random stuff in there, even though it has banks, but the codes aren't right. But what I want is I want that particular document to have malware in it to call home. So then if I know that somebody opened that document, now have it do the reconnaissance. Don't send it back to me. Send it back to you guys because I don't want them to be tipped off. I want them to think like, oh, some other hacker's already been here. Go ahead and say, hey, this is the computer. This is where they're located from. This is their host ID, all the other things. So that way I know I have an exposure. That's the same kind of thing in your LLM is how do you put, so you may have a particular protected model because obviously you don't put everything in one model for the entire company. You have siloed models. And so you could have a specific model that that we have things in there that sound like things that we would do that aren't real. And so then that way, then if things show up in other different pieces, you've got another problem. So like if you have a workflow that says this is how I authorize a purchase order over a certain amount, and the human in the loop is this person, and then it breaks that particular piece and does something different because it was here, then you know that you have something else going on. So it's not always about an insider or a hacker that got in, as it is also a honeypot to make sure that your system is working as is. Because we've been in this space for a lot of years now, and what we've noticed is we do some things and it does amazing stuff, and then it starts to degrade after about 6 months or so. And then we have to redo the whole prompt of the whole engine all over again so it can pick up where it was, because it just tries to fix itself, and sometimes it makes stupid things. That's why you want to have that reset to be able to go back. But thank you, great question.
Thank you.
Dan, we have a virtual question.
Oh boy.
I have it up on screen right now for you. What are your thoughts on the recent CSA AI controls?
I think they're great. That's probably CSA asking the question. I don't know. I mean, it's all good stuff because the ISO framework also in the EU have really pushed hard in this because I think what we're looking at is not just a necessarily control framework, the standard block and tackle. Now we're looking at control frameworks that have accountability, right? And we need to have the vendor accountability in the different products and everything that they do. So I think it's a great resource. And again, it's part of that whole piece when you go through this particular Monday morning checklist kind of thing is to say, what do I need to have for my different control frameworks? Where can I reference? And that may be a really good thing where you take all those different control frameworks, throw it into your AI and say, hey, I'm a company in this industry. I have this particular system. Help me write an audit program guide and help me write a control framework based off of these policies, based off of these well-known national, international controls to say this is what I need to target over here. And, normally that would take me a couple of days or so forth. It's a matter of, 3 trees, 1 river, and 20 seconds. And the AI spits it out for me. It's great. I had to say that for my kids. Yes, we got a question way over there, or way out of time.
We can take one more.
Well, we got to get to the mic thing so the people in the cyber world can
Raise
hear.
your hand again so I can find you.
Greetings, thanks for the mic. The question of the CSA made me think, because I'm working at what governance, the industry, the people who actually want to solve things like your great slide did. Is it OWASP, is it CSA, is it ISO 4201? I know it's not NIST, AI, RMF. Which one do you think people are using to say, okay, I'll use this to govern my AI?
Actually, I think the control framework is your control framework.
Okay.
And you use all the different things out there that are relevant to your organization on how you want to architect those different pieces. Because something that may be high risk to me is low risk to you and vice versa. And it's really about understanding the business appetite and risk expectancies to look at your annual loss complexity ratios, all these other different models as you go through on your risk and your octave and all that to determine, what does my control framework really need to be and how do I want to navigate through it. I know that's a cheesy answer, but it's a very real answer. because if we were all following the same specific framework, then we're going to have a lot of gaps. And based off the different industries or the different policies or the different data elements or workflows that we have in our organizations. Because, control framework for a hospital is not the same control framework for somebody that makes donuts. Well, I appreciate you guys. I'm on LinkedIn. I apologize I didn't give you the code because I know you guys don't want to scan and get rickrolled. So thank you so much.